So now within the time component of calculating the LTV, let's look at the first element. And the first element that I want to talk about is retention rate. That means how well do we keep our customers? And this is a really important metric, not only for LTV, but as we're going to talk about for other parts of your business. So what is retention rate? Retention rate is the percentage of people that you keep. And when we looked at our business, we wanted to keep 100% of those customers. If we had 98%, that was good and that sounded great, but 100% of our customers was our goal. We wanted everyone who had the product to sign up for it again. That's not realistic though, especially for a startup. What is realistic is what you have to figure out. And so the retention rate will figure out how long will we be able to hold on to the customers. So think of your 5-year horizon. If my retention rate is 50%, then the odds are that I'm going to lose that customer after 1 year. 50% of them I lose. And after 2 years, it's like I'm going to lose another 50%. So that will help us understand how we start to build the model out over 5 years.
But is that an annual retention rate or a 5-year retention rate?
So it would be an annual retention rate for the way that I think about it. But some people think about it in a monthly retention rate.
Wow.
It depends on how you bill your customer. What is the commitment that they have? Is it a monthly commitment? Is it a yearly commitment? Some of them, it can be a 10-year commitment in the energy field. But usually the default is an annual retention rate, and that's what I look at it.
But just to clarify retention rate, let's say in year 1 I start with 100 customers,
yes.
And in year 2, let's say 80 of them stay with me.
Yes.
That means my retention rate is 80%.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that is an important number not to understand simply for your LTV, although you need to understand it for your LTV in that line of recurring revenue. But also, it's an important component to understand how successful you are as a business. I watch this number like a hawk in my businesses, because if we couldn't keep customers, the question is, what weren't we doing? Were we targeting the wrong customers? Was our product not good enough? This was something that was incredibly valuable to understand. So your retention rate is an important number for your LTV, but also for understanding the underlying health of your business and how to continually improve it. The next element I want to talk about relative to the time aspect of calculating the LTV is the lifetime of your product. How long does that product last? Is there built-in obsolescence, which sometimes people put in? Or is it just the product wears out after a certain period of time? Think of an automobile. In the United States, automobiles used to go, expire after 80,000 miles or 100,000 miles. That's the lifetime of the product. So this is the second key component, because that's the one-time charge. The next element I want to talk about, which is directly related to that, is what's the rate that customers buy back your product after it's done? Does the product no longer useful? Or is it like a car where they want to have another car? There are some products that once they've gotten the value out of it, they don't need to buy another one. But usually they will buy more products after the product is done. And the question is, do they buy those from you or do they buy them from other people? That's the new product. At the end of the product life, that's the new product rate that they buy your product again.
So just to put an example in it, let's say Apple. 100 people bought the iPhone, and then a year later, 80% of them, 80, bought a new version of the iPhone instead of buying Samsung or some other brand. That means the buyback rate is 80%.
That is exactly correct, and that is a very good example, because if you notice, once Apple gets a customer, they keep them on their track. They keep them swimming in their lane. They don't jump to another lane. Whereas with the Android system, people jump from Samsung to another vendor to another vendor. See, Apple has this very high retention rate of when their product becomes obsolete that they buy more products from them.
And then there is also the additional revenue streams. You start buying iCloud and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
The Apple Watch.
Yes, and you can start to understand why Apple is so successful a company. They're hitting all the revenue streams, and they're having very high retention rates.
So all of the things we're talking about here, the little elements, they're kind of lining up so well for Apple, and that's why something can be so successful.
Yeah, that's why Apple's market cap is just through the roof. It's an extremely well-run business with extremely strong fundamentals. So excellent. Now let me summarize, these two elements because they're very related, but I like to think of them discretely. What's the lifetime of your product before it basically wears out or the customer's going to buy a new one? And then what's the rate by which they buy a follow-on product from you, a later version of the product? So putting those two together is very important for understanding as you're building this out, your 5-year projections of the LTV.